Hello, and welcome to my Wardless Sorcerer build video for the Murkmire patch in the Elder Scrolls Online. I'm Speed Kills. I play on the PC and A server. And this Wardless Sorc has been my project for... I started wanting to play Wardless Sorc when I played Xbox. It was probably 3 years ago. But not until recently has it actually become viable. So I've been playing it for about the last year as a viable build. Started off dueling Stormhaven, dual tourneys, did pretty well, but it still had weaknesses. About a year ago I was finally able to bring it into Cyrodiil. Before that I lacked sustain or damage depending on which one I had enough of. So if I had enough damage I lacked sustain, if I had enough sustain I lacked damage. So until about a year ago I was not able to play in Cyrodiil, but once I started I've been addicted to it. And I've been playing a whole lot of Magic Sorcerer. The current build that I'm running hasn't changed in a few patches. I've just made minor tweaks, so I think that this is a very strong build that you can tweak to your playstyle. It is not an easy build to play. It plays a lot differently than your classical Magic Sorcerer, but it is a Destro Resto build in light armor. And so you're getting the Destro passives, you're getting the Resto passives, and you're getting that damage hike from running light armor. With this build, I've found success in CP and no CP. That includes BGs. So let's not waste any more time, let's get to the build. So the first thing you notice is I have a tail. So I think that the best race for this build is an Argonian. For a long time, Argonians were not a very good class, and now, race, and now I think they're one of the strongest races in the game. They're probably going to get a nerf. Hopefully they won't get nerfed to the ground in the balance update. But if they do, we will adapt and make changes. So this is, like I said earlier, this is a light armor build. We do that because it's easier to sustain, and because in heavy you do not do very much damage due to the lack of penetration. So you can get really high damage in heavy, but your sustain will lack, or if you have enough sustain, your damage will lack. In light, you're able to get the best of both worlds, and that's why we chose to make this a light armor build. Alright, so let's look at what we are running. So, you can see here, we've got our Bloodspawn. We've got 2-piece Bloodspawn, heavy and medium. We've got 5 Amber Plasm on the body. Everything is impenetrable. So, I chose impenetrable here because we are in light armor, and I believe that impenetrable is the best scaling stat for an armor trait. And so a lot of people wear well fitted. You'll see some people wear Divine's infused. But I think that impenetrable scales better than any other trait on armor. So we have impenetrable. You also see that we have triglyphs on everything. You get the most out of any other glyph from a triglyph. So instead of this we would get like 800 something magicka or 800 something health or stamina. This way we're getting 400 of every stat. So we're able to stack our magicka, stam, and health pretty high. Our next set is transmutation. We've got our jewelry there, and you see that it's triune. Same thing as triglyphs. Triune scales better than just straight magicka. I also tried several other traits on this. I started off trying Swift because I like to play fast, but you lack damage. I also tried infused spell damage, so I tried that. It was a little bit less damage than the max magicka though, so I was unhappy with that. Swapped back to max magicka, played that a little while, and decided that I wanted to be more efficient with the build, so I changed it to triune, and I haven't looked back since. So I think triune is the best jewelry trait for this build. You'll see that I'm running a Master's Inferno staff. That's because we can backbar our transmutation, still get the buff. So we don't need this on both bars. So we put transmutation on the jewelry and the resto, and we're able to backbar it. So transmutation is a great set all around. It's a regen set along with a defensive set, and you can't find many of these in games. Most of the defensive sets are pure defensive sets. So you just get health or you just get resistances. This gives you critical resistance and recovery and that line of crit. So it allows our heals to crit more on the back bar, and it allows us to sustain. You'll see that this is a sharpened Master's Inferno staff. Before this patch, I was using Nirnhold, but after some test, I found out that sharpened is about 4% more damage. So 4% more damage is huge in the long run. It's got a shock enchant. That's to proc the minor vulnerability, which is 8% more damage taken. On the back bar, we've got infused weapon and spell damage. We proc this when we have a tanky opponent that we just need a little bit more burst in order to get the kill. So whenever we swap to our back bar, we weave our light attacks. That allows our infused weapon and spell damage enchant to proc and gives us about 500 more spell damage. So looking at the stats, you'll see the max magicka, almost 30k, a little bit lower than your normal max Sorc, but that's okay because we're using magicka here as a purely offensive stat. It doesn't help our, it helps our heals, but not in the same way as it applies to wards. So wards scaled purely off magicka if your health was high enough. So here we don't need as much magicka as a normal magicka sorcerer. Our magic recovery is 1800. I feel like that's plenty to sustain in a 1vx situation, or even in a small group scenario where you're highly outnumbered. Max health, just about 28.5k. So that's a huge health pool. We get that from being Argonian, we get that from all these triglyphs everywhere. So we don't have to invest much. We're getting that health for free pretty much. Max stam, 18.5k. That's a huge stam pool. Allows us to block a lot, allows us to dodge roll, allows us to dark deal. So this is very useful. Our stam recovery is very high too for a magicka build. When this gets fully buffed up with continuous and pots, our stam recovery could be as high as most stam builds. So this is very useful. Spell damage about 2200 unbuffed. Spell crit almost 33%. Our spell resistance and our physical resistance are not that impressive, but we are unbuffed. We don't have Bloodspawn procced. So this goes up a lot. This doubles basically. Our critical resistance is 3100 basically before transmutation. After transmutation about 4400, 4500, somewhere between there. And this allows us to take a lot of hits. So critical resistance is overlooked by a lot of people, but it scales better with damage reduction than any other thing in the game. Spell penetration, almost 11.5k. We'll just say 11.2k. That's close enough. This allows us to hit people a lot harder. So even though our max magicka and spell damage isn't crazy high, our spell penetration allows us to hit people through their defenses. Alright, so moving on, let's look at why we chose Argonian. So this is a healing build. It relies on heals to keep us alive. So we've got the passive Quick to Mend that increases our healing done and our healing received. Argonian resistance increases our health. That's why we have 28.5k health in light armor. And it also gives you poison and disease resistance. So the disease resistance is very important because a lot of people use disease enchants in order to get major defile without sliding reverb or other means. So this allows us to dodge that major defile from the disease enchant. Resourceful. This passive saves your life on this build. So it increases your max magicka by 3%. And when you drink a potion, you restore 4,620 health, magicka, and stamina. So whenever we drink our tripod, we get 4,620 healing. It's half 10 Cyrodiil. But still, that's a big chunk. And then, what am I trying to do? Here we go. So, and then we look at, oh, hold on, my mouse is on the wrong setting. Why are you not working? Running into problems, guys. Alright, so there we go. So if we look at our triglyphs, at our tripods, They heal 11.2k already, so if you put that 4,600 on top of that, that's going to be about a 15k heal. So that is a burst heal. We use that when we get in a lot of trouble, we don't have a resto going, and that will save our lives along with our HOTS. So along with that, we get 7,582 Magicka and Stam. So with the Argonian, that's going to be about 12k resources altogether. We're also using Try Food. This is more efficient than the Witch Mother. If we look at it, we get 4,462 health, 4,100 Magicka and Stamina. If we look at Witch Mother, 3,192 max Magicka. So this gives a lot more max stats than this does. But this you do get the recovery. We get our recovery from our sets from Transmutation and Emberplasm. So this build choices that allow us to use Try Food, get that huge stamina max stat. So let's look at our skills. We're using Flame Reach. This is our spammable. We're using the Master Staff only because this is our spammable. So if we weren't using this as our spammable, if we were just using it as our CC, I would not recommend using the Master Staff. But since this is our spammable, Master Staff increases this, gives us a tooltip of 7,394 unbuffed, and then it has a small dot. For Crystal Frag, all of you know what this is. This is your burst damage. Got 11.6k unbuffed. Tooltip. You have to proc this, and it increases damage by 20%. Curse. This is what we use to set up our burst. So we put this on someone. After 3.5 seconds, they blow up. We're able to combo them with either Reach, Frag, or Dawnbreaker. And then after another 8.5 seconds, it goes off again. So sometimes you want to use the 3.5 second one. Other times you want to let it cook on them. You want to use the 8.5 one. It's less predictable if you do it that way. And so you can catch a lot of people off guard. Endless Fury. This is our execute. If you ever played BGs, you know how potent this is. For kill stealing. So this is very, very strong execute. You put it on someone, and for 4 seconds, if they fall below 20%, they explode. It can be blocked, the explosion can be blocked, so people can survive it, but it's a pretty reliable execute anyway. Power Surge, a lot of Magicka Sorc mains frown on this skill, but I think this skill is amazing. It is my biggest heal. It also gives you Major Sorcery, which increases your spell damage by 20%, but that 3,400, if you have some decent crit, you're going to be healing a lot from this while being offensive. Dawnbreaker, we've got a 10.4k unbuffed tooltip along with a 10,000 dot. So this is our ulti. I started off using Meteor as my offensive ulti and found that I was lacking instant burst. So Meteor takes a few seconds. I would get people low, need a big burst, wouldn't have a frag proc, and so this makes that possible. So I get somebody low, I see them that they need to die, I use this. This is also an AoE that's pretty cheap. AoE are very rare in the game and very useful whenever you're fighting outnumbered. Alright, so my mouse isn't working, we're going to use this. So the next skill, this skill has been asked about more than any other skill on my bar. So we're going to start with Blessing of Restoration. This is our burst heal. It heals 7.5k unbuffed, and then it also gives your allies and yourself about 2% damage reduction through the resistances. Dark Conversion, this is our sustain tool, and it exchanges stamina for health. You'll see that the heal is very large, but this cannot crit. That's the only issue. If it could crit, it would be very, very reliable as a burst heal. Next we have Streak. This is my favorite skill in the Sorcerer Toolkit. It's an AoE. It gives you very, very good mobility. The only problem is if you cast it too quickly, the cost builds up. So casting again within 4 seconds costs 50% more Magicka. So if you spam it, you're going to be out of Magicka very quickly. Boundless Storm, a lot of people frown on the skill. It's not as good as other people's resistances buff, but I have to use it for the major resistance, and the major expedition is a little bit useful in some situations. You'll see me sprinting with it, in order to get out of sticky situations. The damage portion of it's very low though. You don't expect to be killing people with just Boundless Storm. Moving on, we've got Rapid Regen. This is our hot. So Crit Surge kind of works as a hot, but this is our actual hot. You don't have to be damaging anyone, so this is reliable whenever we're on the defensive. Resto Ulti, this is Light's Champion. This is the morph that I would go for on any build for PvP. So it's a huge burst heal, and it can affect you or an ally. I think it affects 2 people. It gives you major force and major protection, increasing your crit damage and gives you major protection, which reduces your damage by 30%. So this makes you tanky, and it increases your damage that you do. So this can be used offensively and defensively. So if I've got a lot of people fighting me, they're hitting me, they're pressuring me, sometimes I have to hit Resto Ulti in order to survive. When I do that, that's my turn to go offensive. So I'll usually hit Resto Ulti, I'll put a curse on someone, and then I'll start comboing. And that's how you can take numbers out of a fight whenever you're outnumbered. You Resto Ulti, kill a few people, and then it'll be a more manageable fight. Alright, so next, CP. So we'll start with the blue tree. We are a healing build, so we do have 9% into Blessed. Our crit is pretty high in our light armor. Elfborn affects our heals and our damage, and so we have a lot in there, 61. Elemental Expert, all of our damage except Dawnbreaker is magic damage, so this affects everything except our ultimate. Spell Erosion, again, affects everything except Dawnbreaker. Master at Arms, this actually affects everything, so that's why we have so much into Master at Arms. We don't have any dots except for Boundless and the dot from our Spammable. So this affects all of our big burst damage. We don't have any here because, as I said, almost all of the Sorc's toolkit is burst damage. So moving on, this is my favorite defensive CP setup. I use this on all of my builds just about. 61 Ironclad, 52 Resistant, 56 Thick-Skinned, 37 Hardy, 37 LA Defender. So this is to give us Unchained, which allows us to cast Dark Deal after getting CC'd for almost free. 27 Quick Recovery because it is a healing build. Going on to the green tree, this is where you can kind of edit it to your playstyle. So I've got one into Siphoner just for the debuff so that people have to purify it, or it takes up a purify space if they have more than 5 debuffs. Warlord, you're going to get CC'd, need to break free. Now that light armor gets the sprint bonuses, this is more useful, I think. So you can sprint in light armor pretty effectively right now. But I just put these points there because I didn't have anywhere better to put them, to be honest. Alright, so here you see I've got 64, 56. That's a lot. So I've got that in order to get the windrunning passive. Again, we need movement speed. And whenever we're sprinting, we get extra magic recovery. So as we're sprinting away from a fight, our magic recovery goes up by 10%. We've got pretty high magic recovery due to Amber Plasm and Trans already, and so this just adds to that. We have high stam recovery because of Amber and Bloodspawn, and so this adds to that. You'll see I very rarely heavy attack, so a lot of people put points into tenacity, but on my build I very rarely heavy attack, and so I don't have any points there. These are very important stars. We have to dodge roll a lot, we have to block a lot. These allow us to sustain, and so if I were to choose one that's the most important, it's going to be Shadow Ward. I used to run a lot more into Tumbling, but then I realized I was blocking a lot more than I was dodge rolling in 1vx situations, and so Shadow Ward is more beneficial to me at the moment. And that is my CP setup. So I think I've gone over everything. So let's talk about why Destro Staff, why Resto Staff, and why Light Armor. I use Destro Staff because Inferno Staff gets an 8% single target damage. Almost everything on our bar is single target damage except for Dawnbreaker. So it increases everything, all of our burst damage. Also, the light attack weaves. Light attacks got a buff a few patches ago. Light attack weaves are a lot of damage. If we look at our Resto Staff, we have to use this on this build because otherwise Sorc doesn't have enough heals. So we have to use Resto Staff in order to get a burst heal, in order to get hot. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to heal, and that's why a lot of Sorcs complain about Sorcs lacking healing. Because this build relies on the Resto Staff in order to get all its heals. Without Resto Staff we would just have Crit Surge. This Blood Magic passive helps a little bit with healing, but it's still very minimal. So 13% of your max health, that's halved in Cyrodiil. If you have a lot of max health, it becomes more beneficial, but overall, not the most useful passive. So why are we in light armor? Why not just go heavy and be tanky? So as I said before, I struggled with tankiness, damage, and sustain when I was in heavy. So tankiness was there, but I would either have to choose damage or sustain. For duels it works fine. Duels is heavy is very strong in duels, but for open world you need more sustain or more damage depending on which way you build your heavy armor. So I chose light. This spell penetration passive is a great way to build your damage. 4800 spell penetration is a lot of damage packed in. Along with that, you get the spell critical, also increases your damage. So this is what I was talking about whenever I said that light armor can sprint now. We've got reduced calls from here, and we've got reduced snares. So light armor is more mobile due to this passive now, and that's why we sprint a good bit. That's why we have Boundless Storm to give us the major expedition. It all works together. It's very, very strong mobility. So that's the build video. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was educational. And I hope you check out my other videos to see it in action. Thank you and have a great day.